Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Captain America Brave New World once again take the top spot, even though it is also the slowest weekend so far in 2025. So, even though you have, of course, the shills over at Deadline, amongst many other places, arguing, hey, this film has continued to do very, very well, and look, it's still the number one spot. It's a three-peat at the number one spot. Even Toady at Deadline still has to admit, saying this is the lowest weekend to date. Now remember, January was the month where films went to die. February was not all that much better, and yet it is not until this end of February, start of March, that we get the lowest numbers that we have yet to see. So I think that says a lot about the weakness of the Captain America box office. We, of course, will talk about that, where the film currently stands in relationship to Quantumania, one of the better films to have a comparison of this movie to. And it is indeed true. Also, Captain America has finally been able to start to do better in those daily head-to-head numbers against Quantumania. However, even though there is nothing going on at the box office right now, and this thing has all of the room it needs to make up lots and lots of space that still exists between it and Quantumania, really didn't do a whole lot of that this weekend, still trailing that film both domestically and internationally by quite a bit. And so let's just go ahead and dive straight into the numbers. As you can see, Captain America making $15 million, a 47% drop from last weekend. Now, if you go back to Quantumania's box office, it dropped around 60% or so in the third week of release. Just again, reminding us how weak of a box office Quantumania's was. In fact, Quantumania by the third weekend, so this weekend specifically, it actually had already made $420 million. This film currently, Captain America Brave New World, around $340 million worldwide, so shows you almost a $100 million gap between those two movies. So not only is that therefore very unlikely that Brave New World will catch up to it, but also remember that Quantumania, capped out around $464 million, and so it did not make that much more after, right? So the vast majority of its money was that made still in those first 2 weeks for that movie, and then by week 3 had also been again making about as much as it possibly could make. And so it just shows you once again how not only is this film tracking behind, but also why there's still a very, very good chance that Captain America does not even get to the $400 million mark worldwide by the end of its run, especially with more competition coming in the next few weeks. Even with that being the case, things are not looking good at all for this. Coming in the number 2 spot, though, is Last Breath from Focus Features. Been getting some mixed reactions for this one, at least from what I have seen online. $7.8 million there, so not the biggest box office that we have yet to see by any means, but for a slow weekend at the box office and for a brand new release, definitely, again, a good sign, especially for a lower budgeted film, or typically what you would think of as a lower budgeted film. We'll actually go further into the numbers for that one in a little bit. The Monkey, an actual low budget film, I can say for sure, $10 million budget there, in its second weekend of release, dropping 55% for a horror film. That is sounding pretty normal. This movie, though, I think is doing pretty well, to the point where it's already made its money back essentially and is on track, we can now say, to make a decent amount of profit, including enough to not only, obviously pay for itself, but also to pay for a future film with a similar budget and even its marketing. That's always a good place that you want to be when it comes to any film, let alone a lower budgeted film. And so if they were not already thinking about making this into a franchise, they've got very good justification for doing that, because they at the very least can pay for their next movie and not have to worry about losing any money. Paddington in Peru, $4.5 million, dropping 31% in its third weekend of release. So definitely doing a little bit better here down the stretch, as we expected it to do, because of course when it comes to these kids movies, they tend to have longer legs than others. Big fan of the Paddington franchise. I've not seen this one yet, but I can speak for Paddington 1 and 2, both very solid movies, good for the whole family, that type of fun. It is still, has quite a ways to go in order for it to break even, but as I mentioned previously, even the film doesn't break even at the box office, I think that the VOD and the physical media sales on this movie will probably be able to help it out in the long run, but again, only time will tell on those. Number 5 spot went to Dogman from Universal, 28% drop there. This film available now on VOD, and even though it had a better than expected opening weekend, it dropped off very quickly after that, and has not really been able to do all that much since. Captain America Brave New World now at $341 million, so again, when you see a similar number between your domestic and internationals, it just shows you how few people outside of the United States care at all about this movie, which is not really all that surprising because the film is just not all that good domestically as well. We look at that number there and think, wow, that's an incredibly low number for not only a Captain America film, but also for an MCU film, especially 3 weeks out from its initial release. As mentioned previously, we've mentioned this before about how, according to the typical, 5 years or so, like you look at films over a 5-year, 10-year span, most films with their opening weekend where this movie was, again, that $96 or so million number, would have done somewhere in this area up here. This film, however, tracking well beneath that. So whereas most films would be around either 179 to 256 million domestically, again, on average, right, talking about the scale there, this film is only at 163, which puts it well below where most films tend to perform. So it just shows you not only how bad the opening weekend was, but also, and especially, how the legs on this film have just not been there whatsoever. Again, a 68% drop was where it was at the end of its first weekend. Quantumania's had been a 70% drop. And then its third weekend, 47% drop, which is better than the 60% drop for Quantumania, but still not very good. In fact, if you talk about the overall numbers, right, last weekend it was tracking behind Quantumania by 15% domestically, 20% internationally. As of today, based off of the third weekend numbers for Quantumania, which were roughly $420 million by the end of its third weekend, we're talking about now an 18.8% being behind the behind the global total of Quantumania. So congratulations, you made 1.2% back on that relationship. I guess that's a win in that way. And they're still around 13.5% behind Quantumania's domestic at the same point of release. So yeah, you're talking about a point or so, bridging the gap between those two. But it's still a long way to go, and I just do not think that it's going to get anywhere close to the domestic or international for Quantumania. I do think that you're going to see this film end up losing quite a bit. And again, $40 million, I think, is going to be a big struggle for this movie, especially as the release continues. Last Breath. That's right, Last Breath with Woody Harrelson, a very good actor. Simu Liu, not a very good actor. 7.8 million. Really can't say I'm all that surprised by a lower number there. The Monkey, $28.5 million. A very, very strong number for this movie. Has had a very strong response over on Criticlist as well. A rad score over on Criticlist. So looks like it's getting a lot of good attention there. Paddington in Peru, also a well-reviewed film. $164 million worldwide. Again, doing about average, a little midway in that point. If you look at the overall domestics, but it still has a long ways to go. It's still a pretty low domestic number there. You would expect that to be a bit higher. Again, this is not a franchise that has the hearts and minds of many of our youth today and many of our families today, as obviously a lot of people don't really even know the Paddington name, especially compared to other Universal properties or even some Disney properties like Inside Out, for instance. It's nowhere in that category. However, I do think that it is well worth checking out. If you want a safe film also to let your kids come to, this franchise is always a very, very safe one to do. And then Dogman, $113 million. It's cracked $100 million, but just not making a whole lot of anything. Going over to the charts, because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. Let me go ahead and update this real quick. So first off, remember that I do use numbers from Box Office Mojo as they auto-load in. They auto-load in much faster. There's a lot less time for errors. However, sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the numbers to become more accurate. And so if for any reason you see incorrect numbers, please note that is the reason why. I was able to grab, though, the 2-week totals for The Monkey so that way we could do some breakdown of this data. So first off, after 2 weeks, the film has made $28.5 million. So that means that we are projecting the film to make somewhere between 40 and 57 million globally by the end of its run with only a $10 million budget. That means that the film right now is expected to make around 9 to 19 million. So that, again, that's typically based off of a 2.5 multiplier. And so that means we could probably safely assume around a $15 million net budget. And so if it's able to get $15 million in net gain, that means, again, not only does it pay for that $10 million budget of another film, but also that $5 million marketing budget that typically films of that cost would likely spend. And obviously one could argue that the spend for marketing may have even been a bit less because you don't really need as much of it for a film like The Monkey. You can, rely much more on viral campaigns, word of mouth stuff, as has been seen in previous installments, whether it be A24 or Neon. In this case, they tend to save some money on marketing, I think, because of just the nature of their movies. But regardless of any of that, more than enough to pay for your budget and marketing, even speculative numbers on marketing for the future. So a very, very good number there. Now, as I mentioned before about Last Breath, so right now we're getting some very limited numbers, so 7.8 million domestic, very little amount being reported from the international, so around 8.3 million is the last that we had. It looks like the numbers finally did update, which is good to see, but that means that the film right now is around 31 million in the red. So even though this film is in the number 2 spot, even though this film probably is doing better than what might have been expected, single digits is what was being projected going into the weekend, the budget for this thing is reported to have been around $23.8 million. Now, that's a way too high number to pay for a movie like this. You already knew this film was not going to be seen by a lot of people just by the fact that it is kind of an indie by its nature. When you have a higher budget indie, and yes, when we talk about indies being in the $20 to $30 million range, is definitely towards the higher side of things. It's never a good sign of you making your money back, at least theatrically. So right now, $31 million in the red, and we can expect it to not make too much ground up into the future. The Monkey currently at 1.1 million in net gain profit, so kudos to them. Captain America Brave New World is still at $341 million worldwide, and that means that, $290 million in net losses at this point in time. We can expect the film to probably end well north of $250 million. Now remember, this is based off of a projected $300 million production budget. Now we all know, and I've talked about this at length, at nauseum, so if you want to see why the movie definitely costs more than that $180 million number that they were throwing around, which again is very egregious, I think, for any of the box office media to actually take that number seriously after it's been proven over and over and over again that Disney never ever tells the truth when it comes to their budgets. Just go ahead and look back to what they said about films like Captain Marvel, what they said about films rather like the Marvels, what they said about films like Quantumania, what they said about films, even I think going back to Black Widow, anything that they shot in the United Kingdom, essentially. Whatever number they reported, whatever number got pushed to the trades was never accurate. It was always off by at least $100 million. And that was just the production budget. That's before your marketing. That's before any other spend. And so we're talking about a movie that they say costs $180 million. Nay, okay? We know this film costs around $300 million, if not more, based on the reshoots and everything else that we know about this movie. And so, again, I think that right now it's a very generous number to say it's right now expected to be around $250 million plus in the red. It likely will be a lot higher than that. Even that being the case, this film's not going to make its money back, and the numbers are not looking good for it. And so it will be one of the biggest box office losers in the MCU's history. And that fact happening now during a non-COVID year, especially because the most recent ones that we can think of that had the biggest losses, obviously the Marvels was a great example of that, not only because its budget was a lot higher than what they had told us the budget was, but also how little it made, only made around $200 million worldwide. This film likely to get somewhere between $375, maybe upwards of $400 million if it continues tracking and if competition doesn't take away anything internationally, at least. Things aren't looking good for that. Paddington Brew, as I had mentioned, $65 million in the red, so again, not doing all that well, all that great, but obviously, never say never with these films, especially long term. Love Hurts still at $17 million in the red, according to the numbers in front of us. Heart Eyes, $11 million in the red. Dogman, around $2 million in the red. So this film's actually having a chance to break even though the box office total really isn't all that much. That's thanks to a very, very small budget. So again, this film right now is tracking to potentially make some money back, even theatrically. We already knew this film was moving over into the VOD space, and so it's going to make some money back there. So it's likely broken even if you take those numbers into account. Even the projections that we had in our charting said it would either lose $3 million or make upwards of $19 million. So it's looking like it's going to hit break even by the end of its run. Doesn't have a lot of space left to run at this point, but it's definitely still a possibility at this point. But those are currently the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. Tonight, by the way, is the Raven Awards. And so if you want to see what movies have won, what movies have lost, but in reality, they've kind of won, the best movie of the year, the worst movie of the year, Shill of the Year, NPC of the Year, amongst a myriad of other categories. Go ahead and check out the Raven Awards tonight. The public link is already available on YouTube, on Aussie, over on Rumble as well. So go check those platforms out if you'd rather watch there. And it should be a very, very good time. Start time around 7:15 p.m. Eastern time as we go around the same time that the Oscars start. It's our Oscars boycott show, right? We all know that the Oscars have become so hyper-politicized and have just become nauseating in the fact that they don't even really award the best movies anymore. They tend to award films that are either not that great, are purely political, or are clearly the example of these Hollywood producers being able to buy their way into these spots via their campaigns and via spending lots of money on PR firms, etc. And this is something that I think has really tarnished the meaning behind anything related to the Oscars. And so are the Ravens prestigious in any way? No, I mean, to us, they are. To us, they are quite a fun thing to have. But you know what? I'd rather have fun and do something nonsensical than watch the truly nonsensical Oscars and try to put in any time or investment into something that does not matter at all, especially when it used to matter quite a bit. So go ahead and check that out here and here on the main channel, OMB Reviews, and have a lot of fun. So again, 7:15 p.m. Eastern time. Check that out. It should be a ton of fun. We'll be doing some giveaways as well with Ravens Bowling. If you can predict the winners in each category, I'll cut that off probably about an hour or so before showtime. You can submit those when you can. I have those links shared on different social media sites. So you can find that there, especially over on my X profile. And yeah, go ahead and fill that out. Good luck. And I'll be giving away some movies. I've got 4K steelbooks like The Forbidden Kingdom that will be in that giveaways list. I also have another 4K steelbook like Constantine that's in that mix as well. I'll make many other Blu-ray 4K options. And so if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and fill that out. You got really nothing to lose except a little bit of time and maybe your sanity. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, everybody. Please make sure to smash that like button and make sure you smash that rumble button as well. Rumble button. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Quinquagesima Sunday. We are getting ready for Lent, so prepare yourselves, hot minds and hearts, for that blessed season. And as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.